Greetings, auras, Ministry of Magic officials, muggles, witches, wizards, and various creatures from around the wizarding world. Welcome back. I have been expecting you. Today we are going to be taking another delve into the forbidden section at Hogwarts Castle, wandering the corridors in order to deduce what would have happened is in the legendary 1945 duel taking place between one Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore and Gellert Grindelwald, the two former lovers and best friends. This duel was widely regarded by many, including Dumbledore's close friend, as the greatest duel of all time, and in all of wizarding history. It was stated that no duel ever matched it, even the duel between Dumbledore versus Voldemort in the Ministry Atrium. But what would have happened if a new turn of events had have occurred if Grindelwald, using his expertise and vast magical arsenal, had have figured out and outsmarted Dumbledore, figuring out a way to defeat him in the global wizarding war? Was Voldemort inspired from Gellert Grindelwald? Did he look up to him to become the Dark Lord? Who would win if there was a duel between Voldemort and Grindelwald? Today, we're going to be answering each one of these questions. Of course, I'll be doing a more in-depth look at who truly was the most powerful Dark Wizard between Voldemort and Grindelwald. But today, we are going to be taking a look at what would have happened to the wizarding world if Grindelwald had defeated Dumbledore. Let's get into it. First off, we have to take into factor what spells Grindelwald would use. Grindelwald was immensely powerful and possessed a very vast magical arsenal, as well as Dumbledore, and the two can attribute much of the innate magical talent that they had to their time spent together. They were ambitious, each one as much as the other, and both boys shared a common goal, to unite all Deathly Hallows and become Master of Death. Grindelwald already possessed one of these Deathly Hallows, with that being the fabled Elder Wand. Grindelwald's magical arsenal certainly seems to be slightly more impressive than Dumbledore's, primarily because of his Protego Diabolica spell, his Pièce de Resistance. Protego Diabolica created a protective ring of black fire that would incinerate anyone who was an enemy of the caster, allowing Grindelwald to separate himself from his enemies and spies within his ranks. We have to see that Grindelwald would most likely employ the unforgivable curses Avada Kedavra, Crucio, and Imperio on Dumbledore during their duel, as well as Fiendfire, and of course the Pièce de Resistance, Protego Diabolica, as well as a plethora of other malicious spells that we have yet to see and soon will come to the big screen in Fantastic Beasts 4 and 5. Dumbledore, of course, would be defeated, with Grindelwald continuing ownership of the Elder Wand and his primary form of opposition eliminated. First off, a new world order would be established, in all likelihood. Wizards of Grindelwald, Voldemort, and Dumbledore's caliber were really rare, with only Morgana Le Fay, Merlin, Severus Snape even coming close, and even Severus Snape was just one I plucked out of thin air. While Severus was a very gifted wizard, he could not even come close and hold a candle to these three wizards. The chances of Gellert being defeated in a single combat by someone else plummets. The impression I got was that Grindelwald's forces promptly fell apart after their leader's defeat. Grindelwald was a political idealist, and did not rule out of fear as Voldemort would later use. Voldemort ruled out of death and cruelty, and only recruited those with pure insanity, such as Bellatrix Lestrange, or pure maliciousness and malevolence like the Carrows, who would openly perform acts of evil on Hogwarts students during the 1998 school year. Grindelwald's forces were completely devoted to his ruler. Grindelwald used charismatic nature and very unique attire in order to entice other beings, such as he used with Credence, using Credence's desire to figure out and deduce who his ancestors were and parents were, in order to be able to entice him into his side. Keep Gellert in power, undefeated, and his forces would be a lot less likely to falter. They would remain in power, due to the fact that their leader remains unchallenged. There is the possibility of assassination or 3 or 4 dueling prodigies engaged him at once that could result in the collapse of Grindelwald's empire and regime. But remove Dumbledore from the equation, and the likelihood of Grindelwald losing drops. I don't think Gellert would kill him, but a wandless Dumbledore in Numengard is Dumbledore off the game board. As we can see with Grindelwald, in the canonical story and chronological timeline, we can see that Grindelwald was imprisoned in Numengard without his wands. Dumbledore sealed Numengard prison with a plethora of very protective enchantments that he had mastered, allowing Grindelwald to never escape, even if he used non-verbal magic. If Grindelwald successfully brings the wizarding world under his command and conquers through muggles, he will probably be toppled later on, due to his old age. Tom Marvolo Riddle would rise through Gellert's ranks fairly quickly after Britain fell. Tom Riddle was a magical prodigy, rivaling that of Grindelwald and Dumbledore, building up his own strong support base as he did so. For a while, he would play second fiddle only to Grindelwald himself. They'd eventually try to supplant him as leader. However, Tom Riddle was a very cunning and intelligent being, although his tactical mastery might have faltered in his later years, as he always seemed to be bested by Harry Potter, Hermione, and Ron Weasley, and other lesser experienced beings. In my opinion, he would be able to figure out a way to wait for Grindelwald's ailing strength. He would wait for a sign that would signify that Grindelwald was losing his touch. All wizards die, while some reach extremely advanced ages, such as Professor Minerva McGonagall, reaching the age of 124, and other wizards reaching the age of 750. Grindelwald would eventually die, either from old age or from Voldemort killing him. Voldemort would try to supplant him as his leader, either through political reasons, recruiting fighters in order to gang up on Grindelwald, an assassination attempt, or stage attacks against Grindelwald from resistance fighters, making it seem as if Grindelwald was fighting a new force that had arisen in order to oppose his tyrannical regime. If Grindelwald loses, we're looking at a world under Voldemort's regime. No one else in the wizarding world would have any prodigious skill that rivaled Voldemort. If he keeps in control of his regime and reputation, take a hint. And genuine revolutionaries would take over pockets of territory. A weaker challenger steps up and downs Gellert while his group weakens from his regime's attempted takeover. Either way, Grindelwald loses control of the Wizarding Empire, though there remains the possibility of Grindelwald willingly stepping aside for a worthy successor. However, there is one other matter I would like to take into account, is that in Voldemort and his nature, he was extremely arrogant. He was praised from a young age as being exceptionally magical talented, being able to communicate with snakes and other various magical creatures from a very young age, manipulate and influence their minds purely using his innate magical ability. He was able to perform spells that were previously thought unheard of and magically impossible. Voldemort knew this, proclaiming in the air of Slytherin in the Chamber of Secrets that he was the greatest sorcerer in the world, to which Harry replies, Dumbledore is the greatest sorcerer in the world. Tom Riddle was a very arrogant man, and very overconfident in his abilities. He never believed that there was anyone who rivaled him, and always believed he would prevail in the end. And while this is true in some respect, in my personal opinion, Tom Riddle would not wait for Grindelwald to get old. Tom Riddle, in his arrogant nature, would simply attack him after he assumed that Grindelwald was reaching his limit. Grindelwald was an exceptionally charismatic and intelligent being. His magical abilities by this time would have surpassed even Dumbledore's, if Dumbledore had lived to past his original age of 115. If Grindelwald lived to the same age as Dumbledore in 115, and Voldemort lived to the age of 70, I personally do not believe that Voldemort stands any single chance. Grindelwald would just have so much more experience and have so many more spells that Voldemort never would have ever knew. And despite this, I believe Voldemort would hold a lot of respect for Grindelwald, acknowledging him as a superior if he continuously proved it. If he did not, I believe Voldemort would continuously try to prove himself and supplant Grindelwald, ultimately leading to a wizarding war, establishing Grindelwald's regime and splitting it, with some followers dedicated to Voldemort and others to Grindelwald. Well, my auras and Ministry of Magic officials, be sure to enter this into the archives. I'm going to re-enter this book back into the forbidden section and ensure that Argus Filch does not track its whereabouts, students. I hope you enjoyed today's lecture. And remember, you're a wizard, Harry.